Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
I can
Yeah.
hear you.
Can you
Uh,
hear now?
yes, from West Champaign.
I can hear you.
I can hear you.
Can you
Uh,
hear now?
yes, from West Champaign.
I can hear you.
I can hear you.
Can you
Uh,
hear now?
yes, from West Champaign.
I can hear you.
I can hear you.
Can you
Uh,
hear now?
yes, from West Champaign.
I can hear you.
I can hear you.
Can you
Uh,
hear now?
yes, from West Champaign.
I can hear you.
I can hear you.
Can you
Uh,
hear now?
yes, from West Champaign.
I can hear you.
I can hear you.
Can you
Uh,
hear now?
yes, from West Champaign.
I can hear you.
I can hear you.
Can you
Uh,
hear now?
yes, from West Champaign.
I can hear you.
I can hear you.
Can you
Uh,
hear now?
yes, from West Champaign.
I can hear you.
I can hear you.
Can you
Uh,
hear now?
yes, from West Champaign.
I can hear you.
I can hear you.
Can you
Uh,
hear now?
yes, from West Champaign.
I can hear you.
I can hear you.
Can you
Uh,
hear now?
yes, from West Champaign.
I can hear you.
I can hear you.
Can you
Uh,
hear now?
yes, from West Champaign.
I can hear you.
I can hear you.
Can you
Uh,
hear now?
yes, from West Champaign. Row, row, row your boat.
I can hear you.
Can you hear now?
Yes, from
Gently.
West Champaign. Row, row, row your boat.
Can you hear now?
Yes, from
Gently.
West Champaign. Row, row, row your boat.
Can you hear now?
Yes, from
Gently.
West Champaign. Row, row, row your boat.
Can you hear now?
Yes, from
Gently.
West Champaign. Row, row, row your boat.
Can you hear now?
Yes, from
Gently.
West Champaign. Row, row, row your boat.
Can you hear now?
Yes, from
Gently.
West Champaign. Row, row, row your boat.
Can you hear now?
Yes, from
Gently.
West Champaign. Row, row, row your boat.
Can you hear now?
Yes, from
Gently.
West Champaign.
All right, test, 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 test. All right, test, 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 test. All right, test, 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 test.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Tim, can you hear us now?
Yes, we can.
All right, and we can hear you too, without an echo yet. Tim, can you hear us now? Oh, no.
There's still an echo?
Yes,
we can.
all right, and we can hear you too, without an echo yet. Tim, can you hear us now? Oh, no.
There's still an echo?
Yes,
we can.
all right, and we can hear you too, without an echo yet. Tim, can you hear us now? Oh, no.
There's still an echo?
Yes,
we can.
all right, and we can hear you too. without- I don't know how to get it on this computer.
I've got Chrome access. I should be able to give us the presentation. Yeah. All right, now the echo should be gone, so maybe disregard. Let's try one more time.
Yes, that worked.
And do we have an echo?
No echo on my end.
That's good.
So far, so good. All right, awesome. So Tim, I'll just, I think I'll just tell you when to go to the next slide. Hopefully you can hear me. All right, I'm Peter Folk. I'm the founder of Volo, Volo Internet Plus Tech, Volo.net Internet Plus Tech. As you guys are all familiar, but for the listening audience, we were selected as one of 2 providers to do our best to get fiber to every premise in Champaign in the rural part of Champaign County, and in general pursue digital equity and digital inclusion throughout the county. And we've I think had some pretty good success with that. So we're looking forward to updating you guys on our progress and thanking you for your help in all of these ways. It's still a bit of the beginning of the process, but I think we're basically on track for most of what we wanted to do. Not everything, but we have some plans for those areas, even where we're not quite on track yet. Go ahead, Tim, next slide. All right. So we have basically 2 projects that we're focusing on at this time. The first is Volo CC, Connect CC, Connect Champaign County Fiber Now. And the second is the Volo Champaign Housing Authority Project, VCHAP. And I'll cover the first one first and the second one second. So go ahead, Tim, to the next slide. So Connect CC is our rural fiber, and we are entering phase 1 of that. Basically, the project, this phase of the project involves building a fiber backbone, 111 miles of fiber backbone throughout the rural part of Champaign County. Puts every premise within kind of spitting distance of the backbone so that we can, in phase 2, do the laterals that connect everybody to that thing. You'd have to be pretty good at spitting in some of these areas, but close enough. This phase of the project will bring fiber internet to 596 rural premises. The next phase is, I think, maybe 6 times that, 5, 6 times that. But we couldn't do it. We couldn't do phase 1 without phase 2. So that, got to start here. And we're very excited to announce, this is the first public situation that we've announced this, that our application has been approved. And so we've, so we're off to the races. It's $4.7 million of county funding and 7.1 of state funding that are going to go into that fiber backbone, and we're gonna do our best to get it done as soon as we can. The project timeline, Tim, you can go to the next slide. The project timeline has us finishing up around the end of 2025. We're going to be spending the county's money first and then the state's money. And the basic idea is we want to make sure that we hit the county's goal of having it all spent by the end of 2025. I don't foresee a problem with that, given the timeline will probably might be done with the county portion this year, but the construction is the most expensive part. The construction will get started, as you can see there, around October. We do hope to have people live on this new part of the network by the end of the year, though that will be a stretch. So there's going to be a lot of preliminary construction that doesn't actually have light going through it at first. But we wanted, our goal is to do it in a rolling fashion where we're doing the backbone construction, followed by the installation, and followed by the home construction for the people along that path, without kind of bottling it all up at the end. So that's the rural project, and this is basically exactly in accordance with what we told the task force we were gonna try and do. We're a little bit, I guess, timeline wise, we're a little bit delayed because it took the state a year,
just about
6 months, a year,
least, yeah.
To get through the applications, or really just to decide that they were ready to start reviewing applications. And once they started getting to it in earnest, they've started to go pretty quickly. So the agreements are basically done. Like we asked them a question about the audit requirements or something today. But other than that, it's done. We have probably some other conversations to do with the county about how the money will flow and how we'll dovetail the states and the county's money. But that's all kind of relatively small news. And we don't have any, for phase 1, there are no roadblocks ahead of us at this time. And we look forward to moving that forward as quickly as we can. Next slide, Tim. The other phase of the project, so that's that phase of the project deals with the digital divide in the rural and urban portions of Champaign County. The VCHAP deals with the more socioeconomic based digital divide. And so what we focused on was the Champaign Housing Authority, the Champaign County Housing Authority of Champaign County, because basically that's the absolute most in need aspects from a socioeconomic standpoint of our community. So our VCHAP project, Tim, you can go to the next slide. The goal of the original application was to get next generation Wi-Fi, that's Wi-Fi 7, in every housing authority managed unit, and training to go along with that, so that people knew how to use it, how to make sure their devices were connected, how to keep it working, and then management over the next 5 years to maintain that system and make sure that it continues working for the people in those homes. To me, the critical thing there is that if you've looked at a modern router, it could easily be $1,000 for a router that will cover a 1,000 square foot or 1,500 square foot home. That's an insurmountable amount of money for even many middle class families, and it just is really hard to make that justification. And so people end up using things that are 5 or 7 years old, and they really don't work very well anymore. And so what this this project did, the goal of this project is to basically cut that financial challenge out and also give the training to make sure that it stays effective. We were very excited about it. The state, though, it appears has not funded that. So next slide, Tim, please. But we are not one to take no for an answer. So we are pivoting to VCHAP 2.0, which is a slimmed down version of that project. The county had allocated funds for it. We had allocated resources, staff resources, and the Housing Authority had allocated staff resources for this project. So our hope is that you guys will tell us to proceed with talking with the county about this slimmed down version. It uses the county's funds, it uses VOLA's resources, and it uses the Housing Authority's resources to do about 40% of what the project did before, with a third of the funding, roughly. So we feel like we've done pretty well with what this is, and what it does basically, we are putting the same resources into 355 homes. There's 450 total access points that'll be going into these homes, and it will do the same thing with the education as well. That component's maintained. The only thing that we weren't able to do is for the Housing Authority facilities that do not have wiring. We were not able to, with this slimmed down budget, we were not able to do the properties that have wiring or that don't have wiring. We weren't able to do those, and that's unfortunate. We would like to pursue that later, and I'll talk about that in a moment with other sources of funding. But I think if you look at the properties that these are serving, they are the ones that are most likely to have families with school-age kids in them. So I think I think we're going to do a pretty good job with this project. So when we come to the end of the presentation, I'll ask you guys for feedback, and hopefully you'll tell us to proceed with this project. Next slide, Tim. So this is still on VCHAP 2.0. There's 195 of county funding that we had previously talked with the county about. So we're asking for your blessing to continue to proceed with the slimmed down project with that funding. BOA's in-kind match and HACC's in-kind match. It's not in kind exactly, it's labor that we're putting into the project. And so that's VCHAP 2.0 that we're hoping to continue to pursue. Tim, next slide. Timeline for VCHAP 2.0 would have all of those installations complete by this time next year. And then we would continue to support it through 2029. Is it 2029? 2030?
It's 5 years from the last.
It's whatever the correct date is it's 5 years from the end of the previous project. So, Tim, you can go on to the next one. So these are the properties that this project would serve. Providence at Thornbury, Crystal View, Highland Green, that font's a little small. We should do Pinewood Place, Douglas Square, the Manor at Prairie Crossing, and that's a total of 355 units, 721 beds, so up to 721 people served, or maybe even a little more. I don't know how that works. And a total of 438 APs. Next slide, Tim. And that is our update. And I would love feedback and questions.
Sorry, I was trying to take notes. What was the original plan as far as units and access points? What were the numbers? I know the 2.0 is 355 and 438. What was the first one?
The original was 855 and 1,055 APs.
I think it was 1,055 APs and 897 total homes.
897 homes.
Have you had conversations with the Housing Authority on this proposed plan and how that would affect those folks who are leaving out? I'm looking at Stephanie.
Well, I don't think we've really talked about how it'll affect the people we're leaving out. I think that's we should probably have more conversation about that.
Okay.
But I guess something not covered in this presentation is that the state of Illinois' next round of Connect Illinois funding is more focused on digital equity. So we are going to repropose for the next, for that phase of funding to do the rest of it and anything else that we can think of in the meantime. So our plan is not to leave, not to be done after this. Phase 4 of their funding is, they have they actually just had a whole conference on digital equity. And we look to do as much as we can with that, but we don't really know the rules of that yet. And we know for sure that the county's funding will not be available for that project.
The other thought is to utilize this as a pilot program, and obviously learn from the obstacles, but also, grab those successes, the data of how many families are impacted, and then utilize that in the applications for some of these more, again, focused on equity instead of access and inclusion, those equity opportunity fundings that'll be coming up.
Thank you.
How did you choose which would be served and who would be later? Who would be served now and who would be later?
We chose it based on whether it had existing Cat5 wiring.
Okay.
So if we have to wire it, it's substantially more expensive on a per unit basis.
Mm-hmm.
So we wanted to maximize the number of homes hit. And so that's what we chose it based on.
So could you tell me which property didn't have the most units wired?
So we actually focused, the ones that we hit are actually the only ones with Cat5 infrastructure in them. So we were able to fortunately extend the most good we could with the money that was available.
Mhm.
Yeah, the Cat5 infrastructure would be part of the grant funding applications that we would submit going forward, because again, there is a lot more funding that's needed for those projects. So the prioritization went to those properties basically that already had the infrastructure in place in the buildings.
Okay. Thank you.
Switching back to the rural stuff, easement and access for this backbone, have you worked through that?
We
Or
won't
is
have
that
worked
something
through it.
you're going to do?
We won't have worked through it in any sort of final way until the project's over, really, because, somebody could always show up and try and stop it. But Bailey can talk to that a little bit. We're definitely working with the Farm Bureau on it. We have some line items in the budget to deal with that, to deal with the legal work and with the basically trying to move it forward, using all the different options.
All right, thanks.
Bailey, did you want to speak to it in more detail?
Yeah, so first off, congratulations on the fiber now. I had heard rumors it was coming down. I'm excited to hear it publicly. So on the easement aspect, the Farm Bureau has been working with some local ag-based attorneys who do a lot of work to develop an easement that is favorable to both sides. It's landowners aren't getting everything they want. ISPs probably aren't getting everything they want either, but it's something everyone can live with. And we're ready to go out and help providers put fiber in the ground and do it the right way. So as they're talking about final engineering, I'm looking forward to laying maps over plat maps and figuring out just who we need to go talk to and going from there. So I think those conversations are going to continue till the point that we're done with the last mile of fiber. So, but excited to get started doing it.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for being here, guys. Appreciate it.
Our pleasure.
Hey, why did the Connect Illinois funding fall through? What was the reason provided?
It still hasn't officially been denied, but we can tell
Reading on the wall.
that they sent out a thing that said, they sent out a mass email to all people that applied that said, if you haven't heard that you're in, if you're not already in conversations with people, we probably aren't funding you. They didn't say we're not funding you. They said we're probably not. So there's a possibility that it still will. If you ask me to try and read some tea leaves, I can do so. Basically, this round of funding and the last round and the round before that, this is the third round. Those have all been focused almost exclusively on access. So that's the infrastructure to bring connectivity around. And while we don't necessarily agree that that's the only problem that should be addressed, we do respect their, they can plan to focus their funding how they want to, especially given that there is a very clear initiative from them to focus next round on this, on the digital equity component.
And I think another important part is to note the economics of round 3 and round 4. Round 3 was a much, much smaller pot of money that they had to basically dole out. So they did focus on projects that would kind of expand, again, the most access that they could with this round, with the BEAD being literally focused on equity and inclusion. There is a lot larger amount of money available to the state for projects such as this, whereas we were talking about completely unserved individuals, people that couldn't connect whatsoever to the internet, while still a huge problem, the urban population being able to maximize and benefit from these expensive devices, and that equity portion is still very important. And I think we were honestly a little bit ahead of the game, to be quite frank. And seeing now where the state is releasing debt grants, which is a digital equity Kickstarter program. So that funding opportunity was basically focused on setting up the planning around digital equity. We already did the planning with all of you guys. So we already were ahead of that game and ready to submit funding for actual, boots on the ground deployment of technology. The state just wasn't, honestly, in my opinion, prepared for that yet. But this next round of funding with round 4 will be. The problem that we then run into, and as Peter quickly noted, with those funding opportunities on their timelines, our concern is that the ARPA funds that need to be obliged and need to be spent from the county, there won't be that crossover and opportunity of timeline. It'll basically be the opportunity for application is coming out. We wouldn't be able to oblige the funds quickly enough for the county ARPA deadlines. Those funds would no longer be available by the time the application would be absolutely awarded.
Next question.
I'm assuming that if you utilize that money as a pilot project, it would further strengthen your next grant application for Connect Around 4?
I certainly would think so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, again, being able to tell, one of the things that we truly feel, and from what we heard from the state and our Connect Champaign County application being successful, was the narrative that we prepared. We gave stories. They heard from us, which we did with the VCHAP grant as well. We had stories of connectivity for, the elderly population, kids that couldn't get on to schools, websites, things of that nature. But being able to strengthen that narrative with actual application of this technology, showing stats on, a child's ability to sign in when they needed to, interviews being conducted for employment opportunities, that is absolutely going to strengthen an application and be able to give that narrative even more meat to it, to be able to communicate value to the awardees.
The urban housing 5-year process, I guess, is the first year install and the next 4 years are service? And what kind of service is that?
So the 5 years of support starts after the install. So it's
5 years, and support is what?
Support is basic. So that is actually a great question. So we're not providing internet service. We designed the program with ACP in mind, which does not exist right now. It may come back, but this is not a access project of giving people internet. What it is it's solving that they may have Lifeline funded or ACP funded internet, but without decent Wi-Fi, I don't know if you use a lot of wired devices, but even and I'm pretty technical, I don't use very many wired devices. And if you have 5 or 10, tablets and phones and things throughout your house, pretty soon your last generation Wi-Fi becomes unusable. And that's what this solves, because if we are expecting, you know, a student comes home with a Chromebook that's given to them by their school, and it doesn't have an Ethernet port, literally just doesn't have it. And if they try and connect it and try and do a video, you know, in an e-learning situation, they're trying to do a video conference with their classroom. If they don't have good Wi-Fi, it just doesn't work. You know, the stuff just doesn't work. And so that's what this is focused at. This is solving that internal connectivity problem that really can only be solved otherwise with money. And that's what this project's about. So this would be installing the internal networking for those homes, and then the support is, you know, a device stops working, they'll be able to call us up and they'll say, you know, something's wrong with my network, and we'll be able to help them through that process up to sending a technician out if needed to fix it. And we'll also be able to monitor whether these devices are still working, and if we notice one's down, we can reach out proactively about that. Mm-hmm.
Sorry, so just to clarify, so each of these units are going to have their own ISP, or is the building going to have a single ISP, and that ISP feed is going to be feeding all the APs throughout that particular building?
The ISP is independent of this project. So each unit will be able to choose their own ISP. For some of them, we will be an option. For others, we will not be an option. And that you know, this does not solve that problem. We would love it if it were able to solve that problem, but this is this is a different problem. So that problem still exists, and we encourage you to support you know, the reintroduction of ACP, because the ACP is what is made for that. Lifeline and ACP are made to resolve those problems, and this does not do that.
But this will be structured in a way where if down the road ACP came back or Housing Authority just said, oh, we have funds to provide internet for this building,
yeah,
there could be a single
plug right into that.
Okay.
Yeah.
You wanted to.
I don't think it's relevant.
And oh, sorry. Oh. Sorry. So if Housing Authority, for example, wanted to be the I'll say the internet service provider, I'm not sure how this will work, but if there's 20 units in a building and some of those units are eligible for Lifeline and some of these other programs, are those funds able to be funneled through to the Housing Authority so that they could then put that towards the building-wide internet service? Or
I have not seen anything indicating that would work.
Okay.
With the, you know, the programs as they exist today, or existed before they ran out of money, that was not an option. They would have to work with a creative ISP, like, you know, some that I could name, that would have to work with them to try and make that work. Because the programs are built on an individual basis. Like each individual that gets the subsidy has to justify every year their subsidy, and they can't be like bundled together. So it's not really designed for that, but who knows what
maybe there. Okay.
It could be designed that way in a future program, or if the funding was available, we could probably try and find a way to work with the Housing Authority on that. But I don't want to, you know, promise too much.
I don't want to hold you on anything, but all right. Thanks, sir.
Project. Yeah.
All right.
But now I'm worried, because if they have the equipment and the wiring and no service, then
it sucks.
So
Right.
to confirm, each of these locations is served by an ISP that is considered served true broadband.
Okay.
So they're either receiving over Comcast, they're getting those download and upload speeds that is considered served at each one of these locations. So it wouldn't be, I don't want to give the impression that these devices would go in and they're just really nice paperweights and there's no service that can back those up. One of the challenges absolutely would be whether that person, that individual home, you know, tenant, can afford and utilize the internet and afford to have an ISP delivered to them. 100%, you're correct there. That is where, again, we absolutely propose everybody reach out to their legislators and get ACP back because it was impacting so many families. That being said, again, though, each of these units does have accessibility to true broadband, and these devices would simply supplement that service. It wouldn't impede it in any way, shape, or form.
And then my next question, Ms. Burnett, are you made aware of this? Do you have anything to suggest moving forward just to ensure that maybe there is some affordable internet service available for the clients? Is there anything that the Housing Authority has discussed about this?
Not at this time, because normally when we service any of our buildings, it's just the common spaces. In some of our senior buildings, we have had discussions about providing access to each unit, but not all of our properties.
So is there anywhere like a main area where someone could come in with their device and maybe tap into a Wi-Fi?
In some of the buildings, it's kind of funny because a lot of our buildings are newer developments, but they didn't install the wiring or the connectivity for some reason. Like just recently, we were trying to do, some digital literacy classes with one of our seniors at the Haven, which is one of our newest developments, but there's no Wi-Fi or internet in the common area, which our older buildings do have. So that was one of those situations that we've had those discussions to at least provide in all the common areas so that if families do not have access in their units, they could at least go to that shared space. Because each building was equipped with a computer lab, an area that was supposed to be a computer lab, but that's still a work in progress.
That would be great, though. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, this program definitely is not going to solve every problem. It's a limited budget and a limited project, but we do think that it's an important problem that can't. And the thing about ACP and Lifeline is that those programs existed and they would not solve this problem. That's when they were around, we were like, okay, that's great that somebody now has an internet feed to their home, but now they have to spend an extra $15 a month to get Wi-Fi from Comcast or whatever, or they have to spend $300 to $700 a month to get current generation Wi-Fi in their place. And that that's just not realistic for a lot of people who are specifically in these housing authority buildings. That's like 7 months rent in at least one of the places that I was looking at. It's just, completely infeasible for a lot of people. But and this solves that, and there is no other funding source that we have seen that deals with this problem. So we're excited to try and solve it.
And then I will add with the Housing Authority, with our 2024 plan, which still hasn't been approved by HUD, but we did include utility reimbursement. So based on whatever their rent amount is for that month, there will be a certain amount of deduction. We're not going to give money directly to the families, but their rent will be reduced. So hopefully that will give them a way that, hey, if I'm going to be saving $150, $200 on my rent every month, that is money that hopefully they will see that providing internet service to their household would be a choice that they would make.
Now, that would be awesome. That would be great. Thank you.
Are there any other? Yep.
One more question. I believe one of those slides had number of units on them. I can't recall. Well, one of those examples, like how many units were in a particular building.
So I'm sorry, are you wanting to know how many units are in a given building?
Yeah, just one at random.
So, it varies pretty widely. The smallest is the Manor at the Crossing with 18 units. 18 units and 18 beds, so they're all single bedroom units. Okay. And the largest is Providence at Thornbury, which is 160 units and 325 beds.
Okay. And I guess worst case scenario, those smaller units, if each of those residents, or the 18 unit one, if they said, hey, we'll come together and we'll put $15 each, towards internet, would that be an adequate amount for them to get, internet or bandwidth to the building that they would be able to share? So in that situation, it'd be like $240 a month So would that be enough? Would that be going to an ISP saying, hey, our building has $250 for internet service? Would that feasibly be enough bandwidth for those 18 units, or they would be short still?
So average price per unit is about 25 to $30 a month. So that would be a little short of it for kind of lowest cost broadband. That would be a little short for the specifically the 18 single units, but it wouldn't be that far short. And as I've said, we're always looking to solve problems. So if we can make it work, we will. We would.
Any other questions?
Sorry, thank you. I'm looking at our January papers that we got from our last meeting. And you said that you were off a little bit on your timeline.
Well, just that the state,
It's taken a while to
Yeah.
respond to
Yeah,
anybody.
we were wanting to have this, we were wanting to be done with the contracting by the end of March. That was really our goal.
Okay.
And here we are in June, still doing that, but we've been able to move forward with the engineering because it's, the funds have been awarded. We just haven't, the contracts are still not signed yet. So so that's, I guess, what I meant by it. The timeline is a bit behind.
Okay, because it says start construction in October 24. So we still on time?
We're still on track for that.
That's the current timeline. We were hoping to actually already have been started.
No,
Oh,
we haven't. We've been able to maintain our construction start date, our current planned construction start
rural,
date
correct.
for Connect CC.
Okay,
Yeah.
great, thank you.
Anything else? Any other questions? Well, thank you both. Appreciate your time this evening. And look forward to working with Volo more in the rural areas and have some further discussion about the VCHAP. So thank you.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
So next on the agenda, we have an update from NextLink. I believe we've got somebody on Zoom from them.
Yes, my name's Craig Hall. I'm with NextLink.
Good evening, Craig.
Good evening. How are you all doing? Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. We're doing well.
Okay. Oh, great. Yeah, I'm not sure that I would call it an update as much as I would say there's a little bit of information to share with and some question and answer on possible alternative to the fiber project. We had a meeting not too long ago with Tim and Steve. Forgive me for forgetting all the participants there, but we did not receive the grant funding from the state. So the fiber projects are quite expensive. As you put your fiber underground and push it out, you find, as you're painfully aware today, just how many people you can get that to for the money. And unfortunately, our proposal with the state was not approved for those passing costs per household. So what we had talked about recently in another Zoom meeting was to come here tonight and discuss with you other possible ways to utilize that money instead of having to give it back to the state. I know someone is muted right now, but probably stomping their foot saying, we will not give that money back. And so we would like to talk with you about possible ways of finding a way to use that to get fast internet to, the people in the county. And I strongly believe we've got some excellent things to tell you. In fact, I think we could cover the entirety of the county for less than you might expect. Although we haven't worked up a proposal at this point, this is more of a discussion of the concepts. And I paused because I don't want to launch into a 5 to 10 minute educational portion of how that can work. But if there's any initial questions, maybe I should pause there, or give Tim or Steve a chance to say anything. Otherwise, I'll forge ahead.
Hey, Craig, did the
Yes.
state give you guys any feedback about why your project wasn't funded?
Not exactly. I think, as Peter mentioned, when you're not awarded, they don't necessarily hand you a red card. But you more see the writing on the wall that other people are moving forward, and Volo's moving forward. And we knew that a month ago, and so we've been saying we don't think we're going to get that. At this point, I'm relatively sure that's the case, but we don't have reasons why. I would tell you though, I'm sure it's what we projected our costs to be to get fiber in the ground out to the houses planned. Cost.
So,
Would you like me to go ahead?
yeah. Okay. So kind of what the administration is looking for from the task force at this point is NextLink had won the more rural plan to begin with, right? So more
That's
construction
why it
and
costs more. Yeah.
fewer houses. So it seems like our two options at this point are they do what they can with the ARPA money that we've given them for broadband fiber, knowing that that's not going to go real far, but we get something in the ground. The other option would be for them to talk about the wireless access point, fixed wireless system,
Yep.
which is my layman's understanding, and Craig can get into the details, a hybrid between some fiber, like basically supplying a wireless access point. So we would get the project started, we could get to more houses, we could do more things. It wouldn't be completely just broadband fiber in the ground. And since that's a little different than what has consistently been discussed by the task force, we wanted you all to talk directly with Craig about what this fixed wireless thing is and make sure that that is in line with the mission and vision of what you're trying to do before we go down the path of them actually drafting a full-on proposal of how that would work. Does that make sense? Seem reasonable? Okay. So Craig, maybe if you want to tell us a little bit about the fixed wireless, what it is and how it's different, and we go from there.
Sure. So it is broadband. The terminology is just a matter of speed, and fixed wireless delivers incredibly fast speeds. If we were going to compare fixed wireless with your fiber, fiber has the ability, once it is in place, to scale up a little easier. It's more of a throw the switch than it is put more fiber in the ground again. So scalability is better with fiber. And I know as people try to future-proof their planning, you don't want to necessarily limit how high you can go with something, as far as how much bandwidth you can put in. However, fixed wireless does have the ability to scale. It just is like switching out the radios and replacing some equipment. which happens to be pretty feasible after, 6, 7, 8 years anyway. That's not as huge a component of the cost as you might think. Putting in some of the other infrastructure that makes that happen is a huge amount of cost and labor. So I'll just back up and do kind of a high level overview. Fixed wireless is closer to cell phone usage than it is fiber. And I hesitate to say some of those things because I don't want you to leave here thinking that it works just like cellular phones do. But we typically will put radios with antennas that face out into the community up on a cell phone tower or a grain leg or a water tower or the top of a building up off the ground. And then in sectors like slices of a pie, we're going to aim outwards. And it's called fixed wireless because the radios in this situation are permanently affixed to the tower. And then you also put a radio at the home. In a multiple dwelling unit like apartment complexes, you can do that on the roof. And then if you have inside wiring, you can distribute that to everyone in the building and figure out a plan to do that. But in our home, we're all used to wireless because we've got Wi-Fi routers next to our TV or computers or whatever we have. And that Wi-Fi environment kind of broadcasts out in a sphere all around it, and it only reaches so far. And if you go next door or down the street, you lose your signal eventually, but that's still wireless. And wireless is using a radio frequency. And there's a variety of frequencies that can be used. And in some environments, if some of those frequencies get used too much, then it's too crowded and there's what we call noise or a dirty environment. And too many radio signals of the same kind is like when the army is trying to talk on their walkie-talkies and the enemy jams their frequency. If it's too full, you get jamming. And so that can potentially be a problem with fixed wireless. And I'm trying to be very transparent with you today and not just say, hey, how great this is, but there are pros and cons. But usually when I have one of those disadvantages to mention to you, I'm going to have the solution for that too. And so there's protected frequencies that are licensed that we own the ability to broadcast in those frequency spectrums. And so equipment that we would deploy would not have that problem. And the speed, sometimes people don't know how fast is fast and what the numbers mean. And I like to use an analogy of Netflix. If you want to stream a movie at home, I don't get paid by Netflix, but to use them as an example, usually if you've got about 4 megabits per second, a single digit of 4, you can stream a Netflix movie without interruption and have good quality. Assuming that there's no one else in the house with their laptop or another TV, if you had a 4 or 5 service to the home, you could watch movies on a TV. With my company NextLink, our slowest, most affordable plan is in the $49 range and is 100 megabits per second. So that is what the state and federal folks have said is the underserved or unserved. Once you get to 100, you're in good shape. And frankly, in my opinion, 100 is a lot. You could have quite a number of TVs work on a 100 speed. It's not synchronous, and fiber is usually synchronous. And all that means is that your download speed is the same as your upload speed. So if you had a 100 megabit plan in fiber, your download would also up and down would both be 100. And in fixed wireless, it's usually a smaller number for your upload capability. And that would affect people who are hosting a server for a small business or running a lot of security cameras, or what we're doing right now with a Zoom meeting creates the need for two-way traffic that is strong enough to handle all of those connections. So 100 is a typical small the lowest package with Nextlink, and then the slash comes before the upload number. So we're 100 over 20 on that package for less than $50. And 20 on an upload is probably also far more than most people would find the need to, or justification for. So that's speed. And some people would say pros and cons between fiber and fixed wireless might be that you can scale up fiber easier and faster to go higher and higher, and that the top end of fiber is more. So the ceiling is much higher. So that's a bit of a future proofing thing too. Although the radios are capable of going a lot faster than 100, that just happens to be our most affordable plan at my company. And that's based on FCC regulations of what definitions are to be served or underserved. So we absolutely can do some of the fiber speeds when people hear big numbers and they start to salivate, or they say, well, I got to be faster than my buddy. I want that gigabit speed. And a gig is the number 1,000. And so when I'm talking about a 100 megabit plan, a gig plan is 1,000. And I'm telling you, even though you don't have to take my word for it, obviously, 100 is quite satisfactory for the vast majority of Americans coast to coast. When you get a Ring doorbell and a security system with other cameras and have 10 teenagers living at home with tablets, you're going to push past 100 eventually. But there are faster plans available at other price points. And they don't just start going crazy. You know, you can find some pretty reasonable prices. So fixed wireless means you're going to have a radio at your house or your apartment building. Usually it's about the size of, say, a paperback book. And you just put it on a little stem, maybe out at the garage near your down pipe, your drainage pipe or gutter, or depending on where the tower is that you're going to point towards might determine where on the house you put that. We try to get it up off the ground. And then there's going to be a wire come inside that's Cat5 cable, network cable, Ethernet. And that would run in just the way a satellite dish might get installed. You know, you're going to mount some equipment on the exterior and you're going to run a wire inside. And then you'd put your little Wi-Fi router there, power it up, set your passwords, and have fast bandwidth inside the house. So we place towers at different points in the community, and some of the radius distances. So if we had 2 towers, I would say generally they might be 10 miles apart as a good example, because the radius from each tower might go out 5 miles. So your diameter reach on this sphere, you can think of as a circle from a top-down view, would have a diameter of 10 miles or a radius of 5. And when 2 are 10 miles apart, that means that their zones would just start to touch. So 10 miles apart might be good. so that you had overlap and you didn't have a gap. And so strategically, we place towers at different points, and then move throughout, an entire county. Because wireless pushes out with radio frequency, it doesn't really care what your borders are. So if we put a tower on the border to, say, Ford County, it would reach both sides. But you want them to overlap if you're trying to cover 100% of your citizenry. And I feel very confident that the cost of fixed wireless would be something that you're going to be excited about. It is typically maybe 15%, give or take, what the cost of fiber is. 15% the cost of fiber. It is also way faster to deploy it and build it out. And you can also put some of it out there, turn it on, and then keep going. So you don't have to wait until the entire area is blanketed before you can start to activate a tower and serve those people. It would be fair to say that if you said, sounds great, let's put some paperwork together, let's get started, we could have the entire county built out by the end of the year and turned on and serving those people. It would be quick to get done. We could start sooner. We don't need easements and permits to dig in the dirt and do horizontal boring and lay conduit and fiber underground. We do need fiber at some point. We might buy it from Volo or someone else in the community that has fiber, because we need to pump internet access into each tower. And I'm kind of talking so it's easy to understand. I don't want this to be too tough. But you've got to put internet into a tower if you're going to push it out into the community and you have two-way traffic. And so you do have to have fiber at some point, but towers can also share their internet, what we call backhaul, between towers in a point-to-point radio, which is kind of like, the second baseman on a baseball field throwing a ball over to first. It's double play. You did it at second, you did it at first base as well. So you can share your connectivity between towers and chain them together, pushing out, in a line. And then you can cross connect them for redundancy as well, which is nice if you've got multiple fiber inputs that aren't the same source. If one goes down, the other can pick it up and then they can redistribute the signal. So it's got, a good way to make redundant. And it also has low latency, which is something we don't always talk about. Latency, or sometimes people call that lag. Lag is the delay from when you send something with a mouse click and when it gets where it's going and comes back. The stock market, if you trade at the very last second you can, then that really matters to you. And in some software applications, low latency is important. Fixed wireless has better latency than fiber does by most people's opinions. So that's not an issue. And some people would think, well, because it goes through the air in a wireless radio signal, it must be slower, or it must lag behind and have some delays. And that is absolutely not the case either. So essentially, one of the other things to talk about then would be how to put it in place if a tower was up and running and someone wanted an installation. We would take a look at the map and see how that coverage goes and if they're in the green. And then we could go out with our technicians that roll a truck and put that radio on the roof and the wire, come inside, set up your your router for you and teach you how to use it. And we do have two different installation costs. The customer is charged $150 if they're okay with a contract period. But we like to say you don't have to have a contract. And in that case, $250 would be an installation charge with NextLink that a homeowner would look at. And so you, I guess, could potentially look at ways we might try to reduce that. Or I know in some of the housing we're talking about, $150 or $250 is quite a bit of money in fixed monthly incomes. So that would be something to potentially solve for. I could probably talk about fixed wireless for another 2 hours, but that is the basics. I don't know what I might have left out that would be super critical to get the ball rolling in the discussion. But usually people have felt that fiber is king of the hill, and the latest developments in radios and how they work, we're seeing some very magical things happening with new developments, and they go further. They go through leaves on trees. You know, they're performing great, and it's surprising how good it is. And it's been around for 20 years, and some of these new things are doing speeds that are equal to fiber. So there's not one necessarily better than the other. Sometimes it just depends on your geography. And it is very expensive to get fiber on the hill where the one log cabin is. It's just not feasible to go, depending on how many houses are down a line and what the cost is to get to them. Fixed wireless can be up quickly and broadcast out that signal, and people can be up very quickly regardless of where they live based on where we put towers. I'm going to pause there and see if I put anyone to sleep. I know I got a voice like a lullaby, and see what questions we might have.
So Bailey, if I may, just to kind of reiterate to the task force, you know, and Bailey said it extremely well at the very beginning, is this was a topic that needed to come in front of the task force to potentially entertain a new proposal from NextLink. And I would maybe just remind folks on the task force, we're not looking for a county-wide solution. We have another partner who you heard from previously, but just as a reminder, this will probably be if the task force is willing to look at a new proposal from NextLink, it would be for those territories that was previously worked out with leadership and with the other partner who's in the room there. So.
Mm-hmm. And I know that in one of our previous meetings, someone put it very well to say, are we looking at trying to get something to more people or some level of service to fewer people? And if you are having people left out of that equation, entertaining the notion of fixed wireless probably is the way to get all of your numbers covered that you're trying to reach. Unless I'm misunderstanding something, I think you could reach 100% of your goal of citizens of the county, whatever that is. Not, have to give back the funding that you've been allocated, that could be used for this. And you wouldn't settle for only giving a smaller population really, really good service instead of giving everyone crappy service. This would be giving that larger group excellent service. Sorry for my potty mouth. I shouldn't have said crap at a task force meeting, should I?
I just had a couple of questions real quick. How much was the expected funding that you were expecting to get?
I think the number was the same as what Volo's proposal. There was a pool that I think we were trying to get an allocation of 4.7 million. And Tim, you want to nod your head on that? Does that sound right?
Yes, that was the original arrangement, yes.
Okay, and then I have in my notes from January, phase 4 application can be submitted, won't be approved until 2024. Will you still try to seek additional funding?
I think that's the pattern. I'm not in the department in NextLink that manages all the grant opportunities, but there's usually another round of something coming. If it's applicable and works and meets guidelines, we would absolutely try to help you use whatever state funding could be available for you.
Okay, and then my last question, how many towers would you think we would need to cover Champaign County? If we would go with the fixed wireless?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I don't want to sound like I'm dodging it, but the planning that goes into that is why we don't have a proposal for you until you think it might be worth entertaining. It would take some people sharpening their pencils to put together some plans. If we had to start from scratch, you know, it might be as few as 10 or 15 towers. You know, I don't know the dimensions of the county. A lot of counties in Illinois are maybe 40 miles. So, you know, you can kind of divide if you were just going to spread out like a checkerboard how to do that. But there's also good and bad places to put things. We like to be on top of a ridge instead of at the bottom of a valley so that our line of sight and coverage works better. It's a really good question, and I'm sorry I don't have a number for you, but if you think that you at some point want to move forward, then we would be able to do a proposal for you that would have all of those details.
One last question, would the weather affect the towers?
Thank you. That's a great question too. Typically, nothing affects it. A lightning strike nearby is going to make the lights flicker in places, and it's going to make our stuff flicker too. It's not immune to that. But rain and snow and fog and ice on the radios, none of that really seems to have a significant impact. I had someone somewhere else in the state tell me that when they had a really, really heavy rain, like super heavy, they got knocked out. I asked the next 10 people that came up to me at that event if that ever happened to them too, and they said no. So it could have been just that person. But when there's that much water between you and the rain is so heavy, it might be a swimming pool in the air between you. I suppose that could have some impact, but I would say my answer is going to be no, it does not affect it. Now, because I wanted to be transparent today, I'll go ahead and ask myself the next question. And because things are up on towers, what happens if they get struck by lightning? Because fiber is not going to get struck by lightning. But the equipment that's up on a tower is meant to last a really long time. As I said, probably fair 6, 7, 8 years. And then when you replace that, you're going to get the next best thing anyway that's been developed. New versions come along. So that's kind of a nice thing to spend your next wave of money on too, is upgrading if you need to. But if you're struck by lightning, you need to replace that radio because it's going to be fried. And our team, we've got our closest warehouse and set of offices with personnel is in Rantoul. So we would burn the midnight oil and put our boots on immediately. It's very important to us when a lightning strike happens or that kind of damage that we get out there immediately. We've got backup batteries if electricity fails. Those kick in automatically. We've got some other redundancies. Everything's very well grounded, but we all know lightning can happen. So just anticipating that question, I wanted to pose that real quick. And we come out and fix things in usually a matter of hours, depending on how bad it is. And we keep spare parts very handy.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's a great question.
Craig, I'm going to argue with your pushback a little bit here. So we've dealt with fixed wireless in the country for years. I mean, we had one of my Farm Bureau members founded a fixed wireless company called Prairie iNet.
Okay.
And somewhat ironically, I actually am on a Nextlink tower for our internet in the country at home. And I can tell you that we fairly regularly have service interrupted on our fixed wireless, whether it's the wind or it's decided to rain a little bit or a bird built a nest. And so I really do wonder if the reliability of fixed wireless is similar to fiber, to where, our other partner in the room is putting something doesn't have those issues so much in the ground. Are we creating some haves and haves nots if we go to a fixed wireless system?
Okay. Well, and it could be a mixed system where, the more urban the area, the more likely fiber is the solution. Rural has been where fiber is hard to get out and fixed wireless tends to shine. I'm sorry, I don't know your name. Could I?
Bailey Conradi. I'm the
Thank
main.
you.
So, I mean, I guess I just, that's part of the issue that this task force has been trying to solve, is that companies haven't wanted
Reliability.
to out to the country because of the economics behind it. And as we've been looking for solutions, fiber and doing that access was one of the big things with all this money, and making sure that everyone in the county, whether it's in urban or rural areas, has access to the same type and quality of internet and broadband. And I guess my other question, and we've seen this as with some other fixed wireless companies in our rural areas, you talk about upgrading every few years, but a lot of these companies, they may be the only game in town and they don't have the incentive to upgrade their equipment. So what about Nextlink is going to make sure that you have that incentive to upgrade when needed?
Bailey, that's excellent. And I would encourage you to push back rather than hold something to yourself. I'm glad to hear when there's a acknowledgement of a problem, we can work on it. So I don't know what's causing you particularly to have a problem of reliability where you use it, but I would like to look into that. It could be that the crimp on the end of the wire is letting a little moisture in when it rains, and you're losing a grounding or something like that. We would always encourage people to call in if they're having connectivity problems, rather than put up with it and curse us and kick a dirt rock down the street. I actually would specifically like to look into how we could fix that for you. Trying to remember the second half of what you're saying. How do we have an incentive to maintain and replace equipment when needed? Is that essentially, you can nod your head. Okay. So some things you don't replace until they wear out, and we do, health visits from time to time anyway. When you say, there's been some others in the past that they had a monopoly feel, and so they didn't have the incentive or the motivation to be any better than they were because they were the only game in town. I mean, when I got into this business myself as a wireless provider 9 or 10 years ago, I was going to be the monopoly in our area, and I'm over in Hancock County towards other side of Macomb. I decided I didn't want to have contracts, and I didn't want to have limitations or metered connections or charge more when you hit a certain amount of usage, you know, your quota or whatnot, and that we wouldn't act like a monopoly. And now coming in with NextLink in the last year, I see that they have those same values. I would say to a group like a county board or a task force, those are just words until you actually see them enacted and can see that trust is well placed. So other than giving you a charismatic answer that makes you feel good, I would say we probably have to earn that relationship level of trust. We're in 12 states, starting in Texas and coming north and then turning towards Indiana. And, you know, we employ people to go out and do troubleshooting, the same people that do the installations. So in your instance, and we can use you to replicate what any customer would be, I would want to send someone out to the house and see why that is going down, and maybe talk with you on the phone to our call center that's open, you know, all the time to take a call and see what the history is and if it coincides with weather or anything else. And until we've had maybe a little bit of history with you, you won't really know, will you? Whether we have an incentive to fix our stuff and keep it running and reinvest in that equipment and replace it as necessary with the newer models. That's something we would just have to prove with you over time.
Craig, just want to firstly add to Bailey's statement. I also know many folks who are out in the country who have fixed wireless and they have issues. One day things could be working extremely well, and then the very next day, all types of connectivity issues. So obviously having no idea what may be going on Bailey's property, but I just wanted to add that it is not uncommon for folks here in our county on fixed wireless to be having connectivity issues. But the question I had, and I had two, so just to clarify, so if we went this route, people would be able to use any ISP or they would only be able to use NextLink?
So thank you, sir. That's a good question. No, our solution is the ISP solution. Similar in many ways to a satellite dish installation. You know, if Dish comes out or DirecTV comes out, it's their product and their service. So that would be true with fixed wireless from us. When fiber's laid in the ground, I guess there can be a difference that you can go with a different provider. With us, the equipment, the relationship, and that service would be with us. And the same as I asked with Bailey, I would actually like to pursue what your experiences have been if you've got some negative experiences. You know, Bailey might have a chicken coop and that's why she's got a nest on her radio. I don't know. Not trying to make too light of a situation that can frustrate you, but troubleshooting includes looking at all of those factors and where that bottleneck or pinch or problem might be. We do take it seriously. So if you're saying, sir, that you have several of these things happening that anecdotally you've heard about, you know, at breakfast when you meet someone for coffee and they're saying, oh yeah, it went down. Please give us a chance to fix those things. It's not my experience across our whole footprint that exists. So there could be something localized that's an intermittent issue. It's hard to see how those are fixed sometimes when it doesn't always do it, but we would appreciate the opportunity to troubleshoot that. But your question specifically is, we would be the ISP on that equipment.
Thank you. Second and last question I had, you mentioned upgrading, I think you said every 6 years, the equipment that's on the tower to the newest technology. So I assume when you're upgrading the equipment on the tower, you would also need to upgrade the equipment that's in the home. And if so,
Yes.
with an additional $250 charge that the folks are going to have to
No,
pay?
sir. No. Thank you for asking that as well. No, and 6 years is arbitrary. I know there's a lot of different manufacturers of equipment. We work with at least 2 of the best ones. In fact, we're partnered for experimental use on their new developments, and we're testing them for them in real life. So it's kind of a privilege to be able to play with the new stuff before it's available to the public. And I don't know how long a certain radio will last, but arbitrary numbers could be 6, 7, 8 years. And we can tell with our software and how we monitor the system if something, you know, is starting to seem old enough that we might need to deal with it. And then it goes on the work order to set up a replacement time. Yes, you would also get, in all probability, a new radio out at the house if we were changing to a new revision of equipment. If you do things that are big enough to make a paradigm shift in how it's delivered, then you would need a new radio at the house. It's not always necessary, but we would not charge the customer to come out and swap a radio once the installation is done. And really the large bulk of that is the labor to spend the time on premises to run the wire. We try to hide that, not make an ugly exterior to the home, bring that in neatly. And, you know, it takes a certain amount of time to do that. So the install covers some of the cost of the equipment. Your membership fees cover some of that too. So we're not putting it all on the customer's shoulders. But once the initial installation is accomplished, replacing the radio would be something that we would not charge for. And we typically don't charge for troubleshooting appointments either, as a follow-up question to ask myself. Unless, you know, someone threw a basketball and broke the radio in a tantrum or something like that. But typically troubleshooting is not an expense that you would carry either.
Craig, this
Yes,
is Mike
sir.
Smeltzer. I'm calling in remotely. Got a
Mike?
series of questions for you. Nextlink was one of the RDOF winners for Champaign County, right?
Yes.
And have you implemented your RDOF system now, or those radios in those areas?
We have quite a number of towers already implemented to cover RDOF.
How many towers do you think that will be when you're totally done with the RDOF areas?
I would have to look at the map and see if we have some remnants. I think we do in a corridor that runs east to west, where it passes right over Champaign. Again, normally fixed wireless is not focused on the urban area. So I think it's north and south of the equator that runs right through the middle of the county. I know we've got a sizable number of towers. It's probably double digits. And I know we have the potential for pending towers, which, you know, this possible subsidy could help actually put on the books, make a reality. But yeah, RDOF is one of the things that moves us because we're obligated to build and fulfill that.
Now,
and sometimes CAF is still out there.
let's just say you've got 12 RDOF towers up and running at this point. How many of those are directly fed by fiber, and how many of those are you feeding with a point-to-point wireless from another tower?
Well, if I tried to give that answer, I'd probably be making half of it up. I don't know. I can
Okay.
find that out, but
All right. Let me move on then. What frequencies bands are you using from the tower to the home?
Well, Mike, sometimes we don't speak too publicly about the frequencies for anti-terrorism concerns, and it's just not necessarily protected intellectual information. But normally we don't talk too much about that. In the old days, 20 years ago would have been 900 megahertz, and we've come up through 2.4, 3.65, 5 gigahertz, and there's a lot of usage in the 3 band and the 6 band. And if it's okay, I'll say that.
You mentioned that some of this stuff goes through leaves on trees. That just sounds wrong. That doesn't even sound like a defendable statement.
Okay, so when I did my WISP 9 years ago, our equipment would penetrate a moderate amount of tree coverage. In the winter, it's different when the leaves are down, but there is a amount of that accumulates in a straight line that then can mitigate a radio signal. The newer equipment is doing so much better than it did a few years ago. So when we put things in place, we don't spend the money, the effort, and all that goes into it to put something in place that's standing on wobbly legs. It's probably the best way I could answer that.
Okay.
We would put something in place that was going to work very well, and we can choose sometimes based on that geography and barriers between frequencies that travel better. So equipment is one way to get that to happen, and the new developments are just fabulous. But sometimes you go with a lower frequency if you have a lot of timber to try to get through. When there's too much of that, we look at putting, if there's a ridge line with trees or a great property barrier with a lot of old growth trees, we would then look at maybe putting another tower on the other side of that comes back from the other side.
Okay. You mentioned that you thought that some of these new equipment had lower latency than fiber. Before we entertain any proposal, I'd like to see that in a verified test by somebody that actually is in the business of testing latency. That sounds dead wrong as well, especially when you're talking about feeding one tower from another tower from another tower. Each time you do that, you're adding latency to the equation. I don't see how you can possibly deliver better latency when you're feeding multiple towers from one single fiber feed and then going out to the homes themselves.
I think the second part of what you said is the harder to defend. I think when you add a lot of hops in a chain, that you would have accumulation of latency. But what I could maybe do is research for you a third-party report. When I read things that talks about the benefits versus fiber versus fixed wireless, latency is always listed as improved with fixed wireless. So
all right,
maybe that's something I can show you research.
And finally, your lowest end service is 120. And I think you defined that as what the FCC currently calls underserved as opposed to unserved.
No, unserved is anything less than 25.
Okay.
And then between 25 and 100 is called underserved.
Okay.
And this is a pretty common metric from federal and state all the way down. And maybe that comes out of the NTIA. But at 100, you're no longer in that underserved category. That's the threshold that if you're above that, you're not under or unserved any longer.
So if we wrote you a check today and you put in a wall-to-wall wireless system, fixed wireless system throughout Champaign County, you would basically kill the eligibility for anybody in the county ever to get federal or state funds for broadband ever again, including what we also hope that VOLA will do. As soon as you provide 120 to every home or every geographical area, Champaign County becomes totally ineligible for any grant funding. That doesn't seem like a good idea.
I am not sure how to rectify that statement with what our goals are.
Well, our goals are to get
I see
good
what you're
broadband
saying.
and to leverage the federal and the state funds that are available. I have no doubt that fixed wireless is a quick fix for us, but this is a once in a generational opportunity to get some outside funding to make this happen. And I don't really care how well your wireless works today. How's it going to work in 2040? How's it going to work in 2050? What are our children and our grandchildren going to benefit from this particular decision? And I'm not feeling real confident. I'll just be quiet now.
No, that's okay, Mike. Even though you're pushing back, I appreciate it. And I would much rather hear that. I think I understand what it is you're saying. I don't know how to compare leaving some places out, not covering certain areas so that you'd be available for funding later. That would be true of any of the fiber that you hit with a community too. It's the same metric. So the fiber lines that go out will then close down those areas if the funding is based on being under or unserved. I do think that the goalposts move over time. When I got started, 4 megabits was considered broadband. Within a year or two, the FCC said, nope, 10 megabits per second is broadband. And it keeps moving. It could be that in a couple of years, certainly by 2040, for your example, we would see that 100 is no longer cutting it. It might even be true in a couple of years. I mean, this is based on congressional voting on where we sit those limits in those subcommittees. If those finish lines move, if the goalposts move, then the funding refreshes. Some of the funding may not have any requirement to be based on whether you have underserved or unserved population densities. It could be more relative to the digital equity, digital inclusion, digital divide kind of metrics, or other metrics we're not aware of today. I think you're making a good point, but I'm not sure how else to answer that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, Craig. I just got a question about the radios, the antennas that they use. Are there the antenna a parabolic dish or a dipole antenna? Do you know which kind?
It's not parabolic. That would be more typical of your satellite dish. There are antennas out that have been used that are monopole, but typically we're using some very advanced antennas that are flat inside the housing of the radio with some of the new Tirana equipment. Also true with some of the cambium, but sometimes it is in a sector divided by how many points on your 360 degrees you can cover. Could be a 90-degree sector and you'd put 4 of them up. Some of the better antennas are covering less spread in how that angle is made, and then powering differently. But that is a technical side of it that I'm a little bit removed from at this point.
I was just trying to picture, I got the picture of the radio pretty clear, but I thought the antenna is going to need some area as well. Parabolic dish does require line of sight. Tree leaves would mess with it. A different type of antenna wouldn't. I did radios and receivers in the military. It's getting better, materials getting better. But if you want to really power through something, you got to lower your frequency and increase your power. That's physics. That's got nothing to do with technology. That's just plain physics. So
Okay, well, I'll blow your mind for a second and say that I used to agree with that, but higher frequencies can still get into some increased power and push through. With some of the new Tirana equipment, it is something that software and the chips in these things have been able to overcome. There's this thing called multipathing, which on a TV, getting a regular broadcast, if you've got different lengths of cables and two antennas, you can get a ghosting pattern on your TV screen because two signals are coming in. That's called a multipath. What the newer equipment has done is take advantage of multipathings where it's bouncing off of more than one thing. Going through a forest creates multipathing, and the things that normally would have stopped it or bounced it around sideways, this new development stuff is grabbing all those packets of information and reassembling them as digital packets on the other side.
I got you. I got
it's
you.
Crazy.
We're improving on, but it still doesn't get past the analogy of a super ball and you're bouncing it in a room. I can really bounce that super ball hard inside this room, but when I'm trying to throw it inside a matchbox, I can't throw it as hard to get it inside there and bounce. So there are limits, and those limits are physical. Anyway, the other side of it was the testing. I'm trying to understand how the performance metric of the system would be monitored. Is that something that you can monitor from a desk remotely? Would you have somebody driving around the area pinging and measuring what the system performance is?
Both of those are true, especially at the time of deployment. So before we release a tower and say it's good to go, thumbs up, we're going to drive around and in fact, we call it drive testing, and we'll sample all over the place and see, how well it's performing. I don't know that we do that after it's good to go. We would if we replaced a radio, but we have the ability at our operations center to monitor the metrics of performance. So it makes me wonder if we've got a pattern of things going down or being unreliable in a certain area, which two people tonight have mentioned, that we would want to look into that, because typically if it happened a lot, bells would be going off in our network operations center to look at why there was a reliability problem. Some of that is based on phone calls into the system as well. I don't think we rely 100% on someone to say there's a problem if we can notice it ourselves. But it does help when, someone throws up a flare and says, take a look at this. But we do monitor the system and whether or not it's banging up against the ceiling and people aren't getting the speeds that they're supposed to because it's clogged and there's too many customers on one tower, we will start to push up how much backhaul is provided to that system and increase as the needs of the community increase.
Yeah, how many towers does Nextlink have in the county now?
I'd have to count up the map, but I think we're in the double digits.
And are there plans to add more towers now?
We have plans to try to close some gaps. Not sure when that is on anyone's agenda, but we do that across all the states and counties.
So the
I don't
towers
know if I answered your question.
we would be paying for would they be in those gaps, or they would be like new towers specifically for the areas that we've identified on the map?
Good question. I think that the gaps would be a major part of any plan. Just because there are towers in the community doesn't mean that there's enough of a crop of them to get everything done that you're shooting for. So we would be looking at potential overlap in how towers cover the geography. And it's not like we're going to put a tower right on top of another one, but we might look and see how moving some additional locations could be helpful, and go from that side of the planning.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, thanks, Craig. Our county is about 10,000 square miles. It's about 36 by 27. It's a rectangle. Let me give you a feeling of what our county looks like. And I don't know, maybe 25 to 35 towers you would need, and then about close to 90% of the county is rural as far as land area. So my question then is, there's the other option on the table is to do nothing, right?
Sure.
That's the table is to do nothing. And Mike Smeltzer raised an interesting problem about the long-term goal of serving the entire community with fiber or the best broadband possible, and the challenge of maybe losing the bigger pot of money with state and federal funding. And then maybe it's an option to just table the whole thing. That is an option. And what is the time frame to reapply for the funding that was lost or that fell through? Is it another year, 2 years, 6 months? What's that time frame? Did my question make sense to you?
Almost. I think that the current funding is available and you don't have to reapply. Well, I mean,
We're talking about
I could probably
Yeah,
jump in here
yeah.
on that.
Yep.
The funding that both Volo is speaking about and now Nextlink, the cycle is pretty much winding down for the state for the current funding that they have available at this point in time. They're oversubscribed. They're awarding the amounts. The next available funding available from the state will probably be what will be called Connect Illinois Round 4, which will be Illinois' BEAD round. And they are literally actually next week going to have a webinar next Monday on pre-qualifications for that round, but they may not open that round up until late summer, early fall. So much like what Peter and Volo was mentioning earlier, the timing of the ARPA funding is really the question at hand right now. Now, if all the calendars are lining up for Illinois and it's late summer or fall for BEAD, it could be late fall. We just don't know. We don't have a definitive timeline from the state of Illinois of when the BEAD funding will start moving. So.
And they just had a changeover in their directors' roles. being oversubscribed means too many people applied for the limited pool, and that makes a lot of work for them. And that's what I was trying to answer your question about. I was thinking it was the ARPA dollars that you might then lose if you didn't act in conjunction with some of this. So I wasn't entirely sure on that answer, but thank you, Tim. I think ARPA was part of that, not wanting to lose them.
One more quick follow-up. I think I misspoke. It's really 1,000 square miles. I hope I didn't say 10,000. So maybe this is more for Michelle. It's not that we lose the $10 million, right? It's just gets reallocated to something else. Not like it's lost. It's just reallocated. And it's a matter of what's the best choice on that allocation. And if it takes until the August or so, or early fall, mid-fall, however government cycles work, to reapply for the funding, and then I don't know if it's 6 months to a year later, if the ARPA money, Michelle, is earmarked by the end of this year, then it still can be applied in 25 and 26. I think that's the thought process. Am I correct on that?
In theory. So the issue would be, yes, the money needs to be allocated by the end of this year, but we are talking about $5 million. So that's not just to pick a couple programs that we've already funded and throw some more cash at them, right? It's a significant amount of money that would require like some real thought as to what we're, so that's why we wanted to have this meeting for you all as quickly as possible. Like, we weren't trying to be rude and demand you have a meeting right away, but we wanted to start this conversation immediately because this is a large pot of money. So the concern would be, say we continue to earmark the funds for this project on the hope that the grant gets awarded next round, and it doesn't. Then we're kind of out of luck, right? So now we've only got the 5 million and we did not come up with a plan B that we probably aren't going to have time to execute at that point. Because that's the other piece, right? This is a huge infrastructure project as well. So it's also not give some money to a program that's just up and running and they start paying their operation costs, right? This is construction and easements and all those kinds of things. It's going to take a year to do it possibly. So that's the concern at this point, is the juncture that we're at is with NextLink, you know, do we want a proposal for what they can do for fiber for 5 million? Do we want a proposal for what they could do with fixed wireless and fiber for 5 million? Or do we want to talk about moving in a different direction with the 5 million and allocating it in a different manner? Those are kind of our three choices. But unfortunately, this committee needs to bring a recommendation to the board before we get heavy into the budget cycle, right? Like, so by August, kind of at the latest. Like, and honestly, the board's probably going to be asking by July, what are you all thinking? What's the general plan? Because again, it's a lot of money that would require a pretty heavy lift to figure out how to reallocate that.
I know that someone said, hey, this is potentially a quick and dirty fix, or, you know, some language similar to that. It happens to be more affordable than fiber, and it happens to be deployable quickly. And I just don't want that to be the takeaway that makes you think it's a quick and dirty fix. It's easy to put in place, but we're top heavy in my company across all the states that we serve. We have a lot of fiber, but we have even more fixed wireless and just a ton of customers on these services. So I have a bit more of a positive outlook than, hey, we can throw this up real quick and spend the money. And I'm not trying to pick on anyone who said that, but it's a fantastic product.
Okay, just for clarification purposes, I just want to make sure that I'm grasping everything that's going on. So with the fixed wireless, It's less expensive, but we would be able to cover more of the county. And then with the fiber optic, it's more expensive, more reliable, but not as many people would be able to get the fiber optics if we were to go that route because it's more expensive. Is that okay to say option A, option B, fixed wireless, the weather may affect it, less expensive, more coverage, or option B, fiber optic, more reliable, more expensive, less coverage with the amount that we have right now?
Can I answer you on that one? Yes, I think you're right on all of those points. And I think that and this is my personal opinion, and I think anyone can answer this question. We have fixed wireless in the county, right? We don't have broadband throughout the county, which I think, I wasn't here when this task force was formed, but from what I've seen and heard, that's what this goal of this task force has consistently been, right? To address the fact that we don't have broadband throughout the county. So we could figure out ways to leverage the 5 million more effectively for more broadband, but you're right. It's never ever 5 million of broadband is never going to equal 5 million of fixed wireless, which I think again would be why we already have fixed wireless and we don't have broadband. So that's why I keep saying this, what we're asking you for is a philosophical decision, right? What is this task force saying is the most important factor of what we're doing? The long-term plan, because I firmly believe we have a grant coordinator. There's going to be a lot of money for internet access for the next 10, 15, 20 years. I think that's pretty obvious. So we can continue working on this issue for a long time, if that's what the task force wants as the focus, or yes, we could do an immediate fix of more fixed wireless for more access in the present time frame for people in rural communities.
And then my only other concern was the future funding, grant funding, what Mr. Smeltzer was talking about. Could he explain a little bit more?
So I think what Mike was trying to say, and Mike, you can interrupt me if I'm wrong on this, was that at those speeds of fixed wireless, it would, at this point in time, preclude those areas of Champaign County that are covered by that fixed wireless from being eligible for state and federal grants that could put fiber in the ground, because those people would already be considered served, and therefore they would be then ineligible for additional grant funding to put fiber in the ground, potentially. As it stands right now, yes, things can change as we move towards the future, but as it stands right now, that's what would happen.
That's what I was saying, yes. And Craig was talking about a diameter of maybe as much as 10 miles from a tower. So there will be people who will be affected by that 10-mile radius that aren't necessarily even part of any of this. And when you start overlapping 10-mile circles, it doesn't take a whole lot to basically cover everything. And if I was starting from scratch with NextLink, I'd try and do the whole county because there's no economics to be gained by not doing the whole county. And he would also pick up the edges of outlying counties as part of the process.
Yeah, this is Eric Beam. I think our original goal and almost a mandate was broadband and fiber based, and to try to get at least a backbone, if you want to think of it, to ring around the county so that we could continue to try to leverage the funds that will continue to come up, hopefully, from state and federal governments to get everybody on good fiber. I will second and third both my disappointment in digital television when the wind blows, and having been a rural resident for a long time and trying lots of different ways to get internet for my work and for the kids to do school. and having problems with fixed wireless. Yes, for a lower buy-in, we can cover a lot more people, but in the long term, we told people we want to get them on fiber and get fiber in as much of the county as possible. And I think it would be understood by the constituents that I represent that if we can't do the whole thing right now, that we make our best attempt to give them the best quality as extensively as possible with what we have, and hope that we can extend that to the rest of it and not give them another Band-Aid, because a lot of people who aren't served or underserved now have been getting Band-Aids for a long time. And it's, I don't want to say a surrender to the economics and the pokiness of state grant funding and federal grant funding and the application process, but it feels like a surrender. If we went and said, okay, well, let's do this, let's get everybody that 100 over 20, and then make our whole county ineligible for further stuff. And we didn't do what we said we were going to do. So, and with that, I'm like ultra jet lagged because I started in another continent not that long ago, and I'm going to take my now 4 or 5 a.m. body home and let it rest. So, but thank you. And thank you both Volo and Netslink for your presentations.
Could I make a comment?
I was gonna say, but so I'll just say +1. Agree completely with everything he said. I don't know if we're supposed to be going around voicing our opinion or voting or what have you, but I am on the same page.
Yeah, I mean, I think philosophically, you know, as Eric said, this committee was formed to bring the best broadband that we could to all citizens of this county, urban and rural. And I think, you know, the rural point of view, you know, for too long, we've basically, you know, we've gotten by with what we could get, and this is our probably once in a lifetime opportunity to do better than that. I mean, this is rural electrification of our time. It is doing this right and well. I would posit a question, and Michelle, you may be able to answer this. And I'm going to ask our guests too. If we had Nextlink prepare a proposal of what they could do with 5 million for fiber as one of our preferred providers, would everyone be okay with that? No? Okay. Can I ask why?
So my opinion is we reopen the queue on who could do the work.
Well, that was going to be my, okay, Michelle.
Nope, I looked into this. We are not. We actually specifically have a portion in our contract with both providers of what we would do next if they did not get the funding. And we are actually contractually obligated to put forth a good faith effort to work with them to come up with an alternative. So it would be a breach of contract to not ask them to draft an option of what they could do for $5 million for just fiber.
Is the them 2 or 1?
What do you mean them?
Well, you said them, that's plural. So I'm just asking, is that Netlink only, or is it Netlink and Volo provide it, what they can do?
I think to be on the safe side, we should at this point just ask Nextlink and review that proposal and go from there.
Thank you, Jeff, for reading my mind on that one. I appreciate that. So I think the committee's agreed that that's a next step for Nextlink is on Zoom. Do you have a, yep.
Yes, I do. My name's Paul Hickson, and I just, I would have spoken earlier. I wanted to speak in favor of what Mike Smeltzer said and really what you folks just determined on your straw poll. But if you'll allow me 2 minutes,
to tell you why I feel that way and what perspective I'm coming from. When Mike got the grant that built UC2B in Champaign-Urbana, I was campus CIO. Prior to that, I worked 42 years at the University of Illinois in the College of Agriculture, primarily in extension. So I am deeply familiar. I care as much about the underserved rural folks as I do the underserved urban folks. Underserved people everywhere need high-speed connectivity that is dependable, reliable, and I would submit symmetrical. And so with all due respect to Craig's presentation, I think he is giving beyond a glossy interpretation of what fixed wireless would do. But one thing is certain. If you deploy 100/20 asymmetrical service broadly, everybody who takes it or has it available to them will have just been eliminated from current standards of qualifying for true fiber-based broadband. And that would be a disservice to folks who live in rural areas. It would be a disservice to producers, people who need to be engaged in marketing, who need to be engaged in doing high performance computing and farming. And it would be a shame. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity, and I won't take any more time, but I just want to strongly urge that you remain focused on true broadband. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. And so I think as we look at next steps, I think we asked NextLink to please prepare a proposal for what they can do for $5 million in their areas of the county as laid out in the MOU with Volo with regards to fiber installation. I think as we're looking at scheduling our next meeting, I think as soon as NextLink can get that proposal done, we need to meet so that we can get ahead of the budget process here in the county. Tim, can you please, work with NextLink on that, and hopefully we can get that proposal in the next 30 to 45 days? Yeah, 60 days?
Yeah. I'll work with Craig and Claude on an appropriate time frame when we can get that back. So
perfect.
Bailey, I'm going to try to do that in 2 weeks. I think a month at this point, when you're knocking on the door of July, is a disservice to you. So I will try to see if we can do that before this month is over.
That's the time frame I was going for, but I don't have to push it into it. So 2 weeks sounds great. So
we'll do our best. I'll just say that.
I appreciate that, Craig.
If if we could work out the timeline so that the committee can get the proposal and meet to review it and come up with some form of a recommendation for the July county board meeting, that would be wonderful. And even if the proposal at that point is we don't have enough information or whatever the recommendation is, but that we are moving in some direction of looking at it. So we don't have a committee of the whole meeting in July. We only have a full county board meeting. So I think that's what the third Thursday of the month in July would be that meeting where hopefully something we could put towards the board as to what direction the task force is looking at.
Sounds like a plan. And I would say that everyone keep an eye on your emails so that as we get dates sent out, we can get a meeting scheduled as quickly as possible. So thank you again, everyone, for coming in. I don't have much of a chair's report. So with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Carter, Smith with the second. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, same sign.